place. I'm happy to start the oh, there we go. I think you can now see the start of the presentation. So just wanted to start off by talking a little bit about why Zinke. There's a lot of bad things happening now. So why do we want to focus on this guy? And there's two main issues. One is just the straight up corruption and the conflicts of interest. And a foundation that he started, that is chaired by his wife, entered into a real estate deal with the chair of Halliburton, who has been benefiting from these decisions that Zinke has made to open up offshore drilling, to end safety regulations that were put in place after the BP spill. So this cronyism is a huge issue with Zinke. He's also campaigned and raised funds for the GOP while on official travel. That means our taxpayer dollars are actually paying when he goes out on the road. And he does a little bit of work while he's there, but then he gets to go to these big GOP fundraisers, including one in the Virgin Islands, and raising money for Republicans and anti-conservation causes. He's taken unnecessary charter flights, much like Scott Pruitt. He has kept controversial meetings with industry off his calendar, keeping the public in the dark about this cozy relationship between him and industry. And he's also targeted communities that are directly affected by these decisions to prioritize corporations over the American public. When he targeted senior officials for reassignment within the Department of Interior, he disproportionately targeted Native Americans and went after climate scientists. He halted a health study on mountaintop removal mining that would have helped miners in Appalachia and communities in Appalachia understand the health impacts and actually start to address the health impacts from mountaintop removal mining. He gutted the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante National Monuments, but more than that, he also shut Native Americans out of the decision-making process. And he rolled back safety precautions, as I mentioned before, put in place after the BP disaster. He's opening up our lands and waters to drilling. And critically, he's denying local communities input into those decision-making processes, reducing public comment periods, and really stripping out the role of the public as he goes and works to give away our lands and waters to industry. And if we move to the next slide, just to illustrate these issues of corruption and conflict of interest and their impact on communities, just this week, he announced a new decision to roll back public health protections against methane flaring from oil and gas drilling. And this is regulation that required industry to capture fugitive methane emissions, which is one of the major greenhouse gases, and also has horrible health impacts on local communities. And doing so actually generated revenue, because once those emissions were captured, then royalties from those emissions were actually going back to the public. But why do that when you can give this big giveaway to oil and gas? And just in case there is any confusion about whether he represents communities and those communities that are being impacted by his decision to allow flaring of methane, or he's representing corporations, he was actually at an industry event in Louisiana this week where he told the crowd that the government should work for the oil and gas industry. And so much for, government of the people, for the people, and by the people. He's on record saying that government should be representing industry. And that is a frightening prospect. And that is why we are saying that Zinke has to go. And so if we move on to the next slide, this is it. Zinke is working to give away our lands and waters so the fossil fuel companies can continue to profit while our climate, our communities, and our future burn. And it's really that simple. If we go to the next slide, it's really important that we can do something about it. We don't have to just let this happen. We can take action and we can get him out. So if we go to the next slide, how do we do this? We fight back. And it's really all about our communities. It's about volunteers like you, and it's about us coming together. We got Scott Pruitt out. We have forced Zinke to roll back a number of his bad policies, including when he attempted to sell land from the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument public outcry forced him to reverse that decision. So we can hold him accountable. And we know that the Trump administration doesn't care about corruption, but members of Congress must win re-election campaigns to stay in office. And by exposing Zinke's corruption, by mobilizing and collectively forcing members of Congress to take action, to use their authority as to hold DOI and to hold Zinke accountable, we can stop the giveaways. And we can force them to listen to frontline communities, the people who are being impacted by his decisions to stop health studies, being impacted by his decisions to reassign Native Americans, being impacted by his decision to roll back safety standards on offshore drilling, being impacted by his decision to give away our public lands to the oil industry and then lock local communities out of the decision-making process. And so that's where you all come in, and that's what we're going to be talking about on this call, is how as a community we can fight back and we can stand up for what we believe in. I'm really excited. I worry I may have been talking a little bit fast, and I'm happy though to answer any questions. And again, just really excited to have you all on this call and working together to change the direction.
Great, thank you so much, Nicole. And we are gonna go ahead and take some questions. And I think while people are forming their questions, I think one thought I have for you is, you know, are there additional, you know, examples of things that Zinke have done that you didn't mention in the first piece that you just think really kind of show this impact? Like, we've seen this corruption in this particular administration, that it is not veiled corruption, that it is just direct, clear, that they believe they work for the oil and gas industry. So I'm gonna ask you to answer that in a second while people are forming some of their questions. So how you put a question into Nicole is there is a Q&A box on your screen. If you have a question for Nicole about the campaign, about things Zinke has done, or things that you've heard, if you click on the Q&A, you can actually put in your question, and then we're going to be asking people to say them live.
So one thing that he's done is one of the biggest decisions, the one that I think got a lot of press that folks may have heard about, is this decision to gut the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante national monuments. And he made a big deal when they came out with this decision that this was not about energy. And, you know, then the truth comes out. You know, it started with finding meetings in his schedule with uranium interests ahead of the Bears Ears decision. Uranium interests to have a mine near the monument, and coincidentally, the new boundaries of the monument actually avoid the major uranium deposits. And so that was clearly about uranium interests. You also have the Grand Staircase Escalante National Monument, which has a lot of coal in it. And you know, that monument protection helped ensure that we kept that coal in the ground. One of the DOI officials under Zinke, who was part of that decision-making process and sitting in on meetings, was a woman named Downey Magallanes, who's since left DOI to go work for industry, as they do in this revolving door. Her father was an executive for Peabody. So there is this very close interest between Zinke, who as a member of Congress was taking donations from fossil fuel interests, and also his top officials who worked closely with the energy industry, in many cases actually lobbied for the energy industry, and now are setting policy to favor those same interests.
Great, thank you, Nicole. I think that we were going to take a question from Sarah Hayes. Sarah, someone unmute you. Well, how about I read Sarah's question, unless Sarah.
I didn't hear. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well, my question was just about maybe letting everybody know about the need to submit comments for bears ears that they're due by November 15th. Grand Canyon Trust has sent out an email about that today. Utah Decaya has also sent something out, and people really need to like get on the ball and submit these comments.
Absolutely. And please.
I've been watching Zinke for a long time, so.
No, you're absolutely right, and this is a critical time to be on the record showing opposition to Zinke's attempts to get the Bears Ears and Grand Staircase Escalante national monuments. And thank you for bringing that up. And you know, there are ongoing legal challenges against what he's doing, and as well as his efforts to try and put these cuts in place while those legal challenges are going on, and having those comments on the record is really important to showing that the American public is opposed to what he's doing. And you should be getting an email from FO, I believe in the next couple of weeks, and there are a number of great organizations who have alerts out there. So please do go and submit your public comments.
Great, thank you. I think the next person that we're gonna take is Lisa Wynn. Lisa. Let me read Lisa's question if I can get back to it. Lisa put, how come there are no checks and balances?
Really because, well, they're supposed to be. Obviously, you know, this administration doesn't care. There are a number of committees, and Congress writ large has authority over the Department of Interior and could be holding the Department of Interior accountable. Instead, they've been holding hearings on ridiculous things such as how environmental regulations are hurting industry. And specifically going after regulations that, again, because this is what is one of the things that is so horrible about what he's doing, is that they're going after the regulations that force the government to listen to local communities, that give local communities and guarantee a right to give input into decisions made in their backyard. And those are the regulations that they're going after. And so Congress has actually been helping DOI to roll back those regulations instead of enforcing them. And they've been really skimping out on their duty to hold Zinke accountable. And that's why we have to hold our members of Congress accountable. Because if our members of Congress are accountable to us, and as I mentioned, they have to be reelected. And so if they hear from us, you know, that's what's going to scare them. That's what's going to say that they can't do this anymore, and that they need to actually start doing their job and holding Zinke accountable, and holding him accountable for his corruption, his conflicts of interest, his corporate cronyism, and for this mismanagement of our public lands and disregard for local communities.
Great, the next question we're going to take is from Lee Blackwell. Lee. Lee is on. Lee, would you like to ask your question? I'll read Lee's question. Lee may not realize that Lee was on the mic. What specific actions can be taken as well as to stop the bad policies? Are we attempting to put pressure on banks and other investors of oil companies?
Absolutely, and there are big campaigns going on to go after those lines of credit and those investments. Given the immediate threat, and really trying to tackle it in the next couple of months, that's why we want to do this big push on Congress. So we are absolutely fighting this on all angles. We're going after the investors. We're going after the corporations themselves. We're going after, and with our partners, engaged in litigation, as are a number of states and a number of tribes engaged in litigation against what DOI and what Zinke are doing. That being said, there is a moment right now where Congress has been asleep at the wheel, and we can force them to wake up and to do something. And we think that if we can do that, we can stem the tide a bit. And so while those other actions continue to go on and are super important, there is a real need for us to come together right now and really go after these members who haven't been doing their job and really should be accountable to the communities that are being impacted by Zinke's decisions.
And the next question we're going to have, and it'll be the last question in the Q&A, but for everyone else on the phone, we're going to attempt to answer the questions via text through the rest of this. But Nadine, do you want to ask Nicole your question?
Sure, thank you. So I'm fortunate to live in an area where I do have progressive Congress people, Kamala Harris, Dianne Feinstein, who do support the climate and progressive values. But I just wanted to know, other than, signing petitions and going to local marches, how can we have an impact? Because I know that, calling my local Congress people to thank them is great, but it's how do I have my voice heard outside of this constituency?
First of all, thank you for putting in those phone calls. That is, it is big. I think, one thing that's really important right now is that we're not just saying that what Zinke is doing is wrong. We're saying that he needs to go. And there really aren't, even, people like Feinstein are not on the record saying that Zinke needs to be fired. And so that is a step up in really holding not just, the guys who always side with industry, but really holding our allies, those people who are leaders in Congress, accountable, and saying that this is important enough that, and this is so wrong that he needs to be fired. That is something that even those good members need to hear. And so I would say that is important, even if you live in a progressive place, and maybe especially if you live in a progressive place, because your members may be more likely to go on record, and getting those first people on the record starts creating space for others too as well.
Thank you, Nicole. So now we wanted to talk a little bit about the elections and how that relates to the Zinke strategy. And then after that, we're really going to walk through, what are these key moments where you can do exactly what Nicole is saying? How can you help on the ground fight to make sure that your member of Congress isn't getting a free pass for not doing their job and not actually holding Zinke accountable? So the key thing to understand about the midterms is, one, that like Nicole said, the members of Congress, it's actually their job to hold him accountable. And they haven't been doing it all. They haven't been calling hearings. They haven't been asking him to come in and explain all the corruption, all of his siding with the oil and gas industry. Well, the thing about elections is the entire House of Representatives and a third of the Senate have an election in just about 5 weeks, which means this is the moment where if you're active in their district, it matters and it can have a huge impact. It can make it so that they feel like they do need to speak out and that they do need to start holding him accountable. So this next 5 weeks of doing flyering and organizing and directly confronting members of Congress, that's the moment it can have a huge impact, because they know they're on a spotlight and that their district is paying attention. And for some of them, if they make the wrong move on key issues, including things like not holding up the community, they can actually lose their job. So that's an important thing to understand of why is it so important that we're active right now if part of our goal is to get Zinke fired. The second thing about the election is we all know this is so important. This is the critical moment on so many fronts. So We're going to go into it in a little bit more detail in a couple of weeks with all of you, but you should know that Friends of the Earth is going to be working on this extremely important election, really focusing in on the idea of how do we help environmentally minded voters get out in key places. And we're going to be setting that up and giving all of you an opportunity to join us in that effort, to be a volunteer with Friends of the Earth, helping us really impact in key places, making sure that people who care about communities, who care about environmental issues, show up at the ballot box and really make a difference in 5 weeks, so that we can make sure that some of the worst member of Congress actually hopefully don't return in January. So more on that later, but know that the elections are really critical, both for the Zinke strategy and then obviously overall in this moment of corruption. So I'm going to turn it over to Britton. And Lee, just so you know, you said, I want to know more about organizing locally. That's what Britton's going to talk about how you can organize locally on the FireZinke fight.
Yeah, that's exactly the strategy that we think is going to win this campaign. So my name is Britton Cleveland. I'm a regional organizer with Friends of the Earth. I'm based in Charlotte, North Carolina. And I'm excited to get started on this campaign and hopefully bring home a win and FireZinke sooner rather than later. And we think that we can absolutely do that. Just like we did with our campaign to fire Scott Pruitt from the Environmental Protection Agency. A key ingredient to that fight, which we won, was the work like people like you did across the country to organize in your own communities, to call out Scott Pruitt's corruption, to make the story go viral in the media and on social media. We saw that happen in a really big way, and that's what we hope to do again. We collected petition signatures across the country, nearly 300,000 of them. We visited our elected officials' offices. We were writing letters and making phone calls. We were talking to the media and taking it to social media as well. So we are going to do that again, and we're adding in a few new twists and a lot of creativity in this new campaign to FireZinke. So I'm going to talk about some of that. We're going to make a lot of noise, and we're going to create enough of a scandal and controversy, which none of this has to be manufactured, like Gio outlined. Ryan Zinke is, one of the most, if not the most corrupt members of Trump's cabinet. So we're going to be using public pressure and direct confrontation to show our senators and our members of Congress that there's a large swath of public support for them to take bold action that we need to fire Ryan Zinke. So I'm going to talk about our plan to fire Zinke. So the first step, the phase 1 of this campaign is starting now. If we can go back to the previous slide, yeah. Starting now through the middle of October, we're going to be making our case to members of Congress. We're going to be getting their attention, and we're also going to be talking to our friends and neighbors out in the streets. And so the strategy behind this is to really raise the issue locally and what that means locally. And so we're going to be talking to constituents in each member of Congress's district, and that's where we need your help. We're going to be sending you, after this call, a toolkit with some flyers that we're going to talk about more in detail later on in this call. But we're going to be passing out flyers in vicinities of congressional offices, and we're also going to be petitioning. We're going to be doing petitioning in person. We are going to be launching an online petition. I think it launched already, actually. So if you've seen that in your email, please sign that and share it with your friends. We are going to be, National Public Lands Day is being celebrated this week, and it's a really good opportunity and actually the perfect time to get out and distribute flyers in your community, especially around congressional offices, making sure that we're talking directly to constituents, and telling the story of Ryan Zinke's corruption to constituents in all congressional districts. So you can flyer on your lunch breaks, anytime you have free time at events. But I think the key to this tactic is going to be really what we're calling flyering in a confrontational way. So making sure that the members of Congress know that we're out there. So we're going to need a lot of help to do that. And it's also going to be a great mechanism for new people to join in on the campaign. And it should be a lot of fun. So the next phase of the campaign is going to be beginning in October and kind of lasting through the middle of October. But like we said before, we think the key to this is going to be organizing locally. And the strategy behind this phase of the campaign is to really expand the base of the people that are engaged and create a national movement that is grounded in local communities and really tells the story of what is at stake in these communities, whether it be protection of sacred public lands, protecting Indigenous sovereignty and treaty rights, ending corporate corruption and the exploitation of our public lands for private profit, or if it's the issue that is most compelling to you, addressing the climate crisis and keeping fossil fuels in the ground, which we know is the only way that we're going to curb any effects of climate change. And it's absolutely critical. So how are we going to do that? How are we going to organize locally? We're asking everyone to organize house parties in your communities, and also incorporate art and storytelling into these house parties. So creating pieces of art, creating visuals that we can use in the campaign, and especially leading up to our day of action that's going to happen near the end of October. We need to visually and creatively tell the story of what is at risk to the greater public, to our local communities. And we're looking to create a unified national front around this campaign that we can amplify together at bird dogging events, at petition deliveries, at the day of action, and at every step along this campaign. So whether it's, a community visual art piece, whether it's a street theater piece, a musical piece, it really can be anything, whatever is most compelling and whatever resonates most to your community. Because we know that Ryan Zinke's actions have far-reaching impacts for every community. I think several questions have come up. What if we live in a place where, we don't have public lands? What if we don't live in the West? Well, the Department of Interior has jurisdiction over a lot of things that impacts every state in the country. It has implications over tribal affairs, the management of public lands, offshore oil drilling, whether it be the permission of offshore oil drilling or the regulation of it. Hydropower, regulation of coal mines is under the Department of Interior. The Endangered Species Act is also under threat right now, and that is under the jurisdiction of the Department of Interior. So no matter where you live, this is going to affect you in a really important way. So that's why we need to bring together this creative component and tell the story of why Zinke must go. So in addition to these house parties and these creative art pieces that we're going to create together, we're going to be collecting handwritten letters as well. And that is to build support and tell our stories together. And we're going to deliver these letters to Senate and congressional offices during our day of action in the middle of October. So in the letters, asking people, what does protecting public lands and wild spaces mean to you? What does protecting Indigenous sovereignty mean to you? What does it mean to you to keep fossils on the ground to, curb the worst effects of climate change? So really telling our own stories in our local communities. The next phase of the campaign, which is going to last throughout the whole month of October, is we're going to be directly confronting members of Congress in their districts at public events. Bird dogging is a really great tactic to use, and we're going to use it in the lead up to Election Day. And we're going to be, getting our elected officials on record, and we're going to be holding them accountable to that. And so bird dogging happens at public events to get them, get elected officials on the record and get them to commit to taking action to fire Ryan Zinke and block the Trump administration's harmful agenda. So we're going to be building a really great team. Hopefully every one of you can be a part of that team. And we have a really great team behind us at Friends of the Earth that is going to be doing all the important and necessary research to make sure that we're targeting, strategically targeting members of Congress, having their schedules. We definitely need your help with that, but there's so much support behind you if you do want to be part of our bird dogging team. And so later on in the call, we're going to be launching a poll, and you can indicate your interest in bird dogging. And if you don't know what it is, that's fine. If you are interested in learning more, we're actually going to be hosting a special training call early in October, and we'll invite all of you to that to learn more. Like, what exactly is bird dogging? What does this entail? Why is the strategy important, and how is it going to help us to win? So keep an eye out for that, and definitely check that box in the poll a little bit later if you're interested. So the last two phases of the campaign are a day of action that we're having in mid to late October, and it's going to be the culmination of all of our efforts. We're looking at October 18th for the date, and it's going to happen a few weeks before the midterm elections, and we're going to deliver our petition signatures and our handwritten letters. We're also going to be bringing our creative visual pieces like banners and street theater and things like that to tell the story in front of our elected officials. And so we're not going to talk too much about that today, but we will be sending out more information in detail about that day of action, and also hosting another call like this to dig deeper a little bit with you and strategize a little bit more with you. The last phase of the campaign is holding members of Congress accountable. This is just before the election and post-election. So in late October and early November, we're actually going to be working to make sure people are showing up in really key races across the country. And we're going to be providing opportunities for you to volunteer phone banking and text banking, because members of Congress are up for re-election, like Liz said, and they're going to be more susceptible to pressure. And so we're going to be spending the time right before the election making sure that people are showing up to vote. All right, so if we can go to that slide. So how can you get involved? So this is the really simple, pathway for us. So we're asking you to help pass out flyers. We're asking you to collect petition signatures, organize house parties, join our bird dogging team, or all of the above. So I'm going to just launch a quick poll, and it's really easy to take. You'll see it pop up on your screen here. And you can check all that apply for the tactics that you would like to get involved with based on your time, talent, temperament. There should be something for everyone. So we'll just give you a minute to fill out that poll. And just as a reminder, we will be doing this poll again. So if you need a second to think about it, you'll have another opportunity to fill out the poll. All right, people are, lots of responses. I like that folks are interested in all of the above. This is great. Bird dogging, lots of people want a bird dog. We need more folks to organize house parties. It's really simple. Brianna's actually going to walk you through all the steps to organize house parties, and I'll also talk about the strategy of why they're so important and our, in our theory of change to FireZinke. I see a question from Derek. What's bird dogging? That's a really good question. I know it's kind of a jargony term, but it is, oh, don't be sorry. Ask all the questions. So bird dogging is when you directly confront a member of Congress kind of by surprise. So you meet them at a rally. Oftentimes you're in the line, like the handshake line, and you kind of catch them off guard and you ask them a very direct question. Will you support us to fire Ryan Zinke? Or will you take bold action to fire Ryan Zinke? And you get them on record for that and you hold them accountable, and it's super effective. Okay, well, I am going to end this poll for now. We'll do it again, and I'm going to hand it over to Jenny to talk about digging deeper into some of our tactics.
And can everyone see me? Oh, there you are. Okay. Hello. So, hi everyone. My name is Jenny Bach, and I'm a regional organizer for Friends of the Earth. You probably have heard all of our voices and other calls. And I'm based in New York City, in Brooklyn, where I grew up, born and raised. And I'm going to talk to you all tonight just about our tactic of flyering, and that is going to be one of the tactics we're using in our beginning phases of the campaign, and in addition to petitioning to build support for our FireZinke campaign locally. So I am going to just walk you through on tips of like how we recommend you go about flyering in your community to raise the alarm, especially to get your congressperson's attention in terms of making sure that they are aware that a lot of their constituents are upset that they're not properly holding Ryan Zinke accountable for his corruption. Because like Liz mentioned, the reality is we are not hearing enough from Congress people about what they're doing to shine a spotlight on Ryan Zinke's corruption. And there's not enough people talking about Zinke basically on the ground, maybe in DC, but we need to really create a lot more noise in our congressional districts so that our congresspeople know that their constituents are watching them and expecting them to get rid of Zinke, just like we got rid of Pruitt. So just to give you the basic 101 for flyering, we did do flyering for our Fire Pruitt campaign. It is going to be a similar tactic, but in this case, we are having everyone use 2 different kinds of flyers. And I'll walk you through, I'll show you examples of those flyers. But just again, to reiterate, why are we flyering in the beginning of our campaign? It's to really do that work of spreading the word on the ground, getting people talking about Zinke. Who is this guy? What is the Department of Interior? Well, they manage all of our, government-owned land and are poisoning our air and water, and disproportionately impacting communities of color, low-income communities, tribal lands, so indigenous communities. So we need to be talking a lot more about that. How we're going to spread the word is through flyering. So basically the 2 ways we were recommending people use our flyers is, first is to cast a wide net, and that is basically just get the flyer in as many people's hands as possible. And some examples for where you can be doing that is you can go to busy street corners, public like transit entrances like the metro or subway, whatever city you call it, parks, community events like a big concert going on, or summer's winding down, so whatever other kind of community events are going on. And I don't know, people can put in the chat box other ideas for where good places to go flyering. And then the other big tactic for flyering we want people to use is to do more intentional flyering around your congressional person's office. So that includes your congressperson's office and your senator, your 2 senators' offices, is blasting their like neighborhood office or your district office with flyers like all around the actual area around their office outside. So think putting flyers on people's cars, putting flyers on, if you're in like a city urban area, like lampposts. I've blasted Senator Schumer in New York, his Manhattan office, all the lampposts nearby with flyers. And that is a guaranteed way to get your congressperson's or senator's attention, is their staff guaranteed will see those flyers posted around. And that will be an easy way to show them in real time that you are watching them and you are raising the alarm about Ryan Zinke's corruption and you want them to act and to fire Zinke. So those are the 2 main tactics for flyering. Again, the intentional one is a little more confrontational. So you think about how you want to, go about it, but we're Friends of the Earth, we're not afraid to call people out for their corruption and to take bold action to do that. So have at it, you know, plaster up people's cars, the sidewalk, anywhere. And, you know, we always try to just say, ask for forgiveness later, but obviously stay in your comfort zone. And these are the two examples of flyers. So the first one is our generic flyer. This is like, you can print it right away. It's ready to go. Hand out to people just as it is. This is the generic one because it's just has the general, like, tell your US representative on the top. And then the second flyer is one where you would actually go in, and it's an editable flyer where you can go in and just make it specific to your congressperson, add their name to the flyer. And we recommend that you use the second flyer when at all possible, because again, your member of Congress will be seeing these flyers and they will pay more attention if their name is on the flyer, and people will maybe recognize the significance of the flyer more if they see their congressperson's name on it. They may not know who Zinke is, but they know who their representative is, you know, ideally. They know who their senator or their House representative is. So those are the two flyers, and I think that is it for my section. And I'm going to hand it off to Brianna to tell you about other tactics we're going to be using in our campaign.
All right. Can everybody hear me? Okay. So hi, everybody. My name is Brianna Steele, and I'm also a regional organizer at Friends of the Earth. And I'm based in Raleigh, North Carolina. And thank you so much, Jenny. So I'm going to talk about how we can really turn up the heat on firing Zinke by using house parties as a campaign tactic. So, you know, we really need to bring in new people into our fight to fire Zinke. And as Britton stated, we, you know, need to create a national movement really grounded in our local communities that's calling for our members of Congress in our districts to really hold Zinke accountable for his harm to our communities. And so we can do that by using house parties as a tactic and as a way to, you know, help build local teams wherever we are. So, you know, I want to talk about, you know, why house parties, sort of what they are and why they're important. So hosting a house party is really an extremely powerful way to build community by hosting a house party. And you can go to the next slide, Jenny. Yeah. So by hosting a house party, you know, by doing that, you can recruit volunteers, you can spread the word about the FireZinke campaign, and get a feeling for what issues matter most to your friends and your neighbors. And we call this a house meeting, but really it's just a gathering of, you know, other interested people around you. So you can have a house party at your home, but it also could be, you know, at a coffee shop, in the local library, or really just any other place that you choose. And actually, can you just click through? Yeah, thanks. So just some of those points. So now I'm gonna, you know, walk through a checklist that can be used to help host a house party that really makes sure all the steps are covered. So on the next slide, so some things that you want to kind of go through or think about when hosting a house party is, you know, picking a date, a time, and a location. I mean, that's, you know, really important. You want to also make sure you have a list of people that you'd like to invite. And so you want to invite everybody from that list. You know, you can do that through calling people, texting people, emailing, using Facebook. And you also want to create an agenda. And then also you want to make sure you prepare, you know, any materials that you need. So you might, you know, you want to have, you know, a sign-in sheet, maybe something to take notes with during the, you know, if there's a group discussion, that could be, you know, butcher block paper, a Google Doc, or any other shared writing surface. And you want to have, you know, handouts or educational tools that you might want to be able to give to the group. And then some optional materials that I think would be really handy or maybe like letter writing materials. So if you're going to be, if the house party is, writing, part of the house party is going to be writing letters to your representatives, then you want to have, pens and pencils, maybe some envelopes, a mailing address if you're a local member of Congress, stamps, letter writing prompts. Britton went over some really good ones earlier, and, even a sample letter. And then also optional too, or, like art materials. So we want, house parties could be really creative. And maybe at the house party, you want to make some creative visuals that could be used, as we said later, for like our, for the National Day of Action around FireZinke. So maybe you want to have some materials to create signs or banners or poster making materials or prop creation materials that could be really useful. And then also you want to send a reminder, before the house party, a reminder email and or text to, folks before the day, just to remind them of the time and location. So during the house party, some things that you want to do, have everybody sign in, make sure you're, set up meeting roles, there, should be, maybe a greeter, someone to welcome guests as they, enter. A facilitator would most likely be, the person hosting the house party, but then a note taker and also a timekeeper is also really is critical too. And then you want to, during the house party, make sure that, there's going to be discussion, some action. So decide on some action and decide on some clear steps moving forward from that house party. And then be sure to take some pictures, because it should also be, fun, and they should be fun and, be as creative as you like to be. And so after the house party, some key things to do is just making sure to, follow up with folks that attended and really thank them, whether that's through email, text, or calling folks. And then, sending out the notes from the meeting, just including what the next steps are so people are clear. And then we'd love if you could send notes to the organizing team at Friends of the Earth. And so our email, again, is organize@fo.org. And also you can post pictures on the volunteer, Friends of the Earth US volunteer Facebook page. And so if you're not a part of that, you should definitely join. So really, just overall, to repeat what I just said, planning the house party really just takes 3 key steps. So figuring out the logistics, making a list of people you want to invite and asking them to come, and then coming up with an agenda. And so if you already know, what event you're going to plan at your house party, and in this case, maybe you're doing a letter writing party, or maybe making some art to prep for the mid-October National Day of Action, then it's just good to have some notes on that as well. So now I'm just going to transition into a final question and answer section. So we have about 5 minutes for a final Q&A. So if you have questions, you can type them into the question box on Zoom or the chat box, or you can raise your hand and we'll call on you to ask your question. And so let's see. Who has questions? Let's see. Let's see. I think there's one hand raised. Let's see. Can anybody on my team? Oh, I see an Ivy Hill or a Dave. Let's see. I see. Actually, that's David Vassar. I'm going to unmute you. Okay. Let's see. I wasn't able to do that. Oh, okay. Let's see. Other questions? See a question from Drew. Can someone unmute on my team? Sorry, I'm having trouble.
Hello.
Okay. Hey. Hello, Drew. Your question.
Yeah, I was just wondering if you guys have some sort of kit or toolbox or something you can send me to help me organize a house party, like with sample letters and some of the materials you were mentioning.
Yes, great question. We do. We're going to send out a toolkit with materials, the checklist, a planning list, and other things that you need for the house parties, but also including the flyers that Jenny mentioned earlier, petitions, and everything like that. And that'll be updated throughout the next couple of months for the campaign. Yeah, we'll send that out tomorrow. Thanks. Let's see, I got another question. Are there any tips or guidance on writing letters to the editor available? Yes, we do have tips and guidance on that. And let's see, Robert Bloyer, we can either include that in the toolkit, if you reach out to us directly at the organize@foe.org email address, we can send that to you. Yeah. Let's see. I see. Michael has a question.
Hello?
Yes.
So I live in a district in a state where my representatives and senators support environmentally friendly policies. And it's frustrating to me, and I don't really know how to be more proactively involved politically when the districts and states that are opposed to our eco-friendly policies are not my own. Any advice on how to deal with that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, I would say, obviously in your district where you have representatives that are, eco-friendly and supportive, we still want to, really pressure them around this issue. But also, let's see. Yeah, that's really important. And Liz, I want to just let you chime in to add something to that.
Yeah, I think, it's always super important to make sure that your members, even if they're supportive of environmental issues, that they actually take extreme leadership, especially in this moment. Like if we have some members of Congress who are anti-environmentalists, then the members who actually know that this is critical in this moment need to be stepping up and being leaders. So that's one thing to think about, is how do we actually get them to do more? The second thing to think about is this particular next 5 to 6 weeks. Both Britton and I kind of mentioned the fact that we're going to be developing some ways that people from around the country can help make phone calls and text into environmentally minded folks in critical districts. And so that's one of the critical things that you can do this fall. It was extremely important in the Maryland primary. The work that we did, we actually had people from around the country calling environmentally minded voters into Maryland. In fact, one woman who was doing some of the calling had actually been Ben Jealous' grade school teacher, and she now lived in Washington State, and she was able to call environmentally environmentally minded voters in Maryland and encourage them to get out to vote for the primary. So I think that's one thing that's a short-term thing, but then the longer-term thing is it's not good enough for our members who know that the environmental issues are important to just be voting the right way. They actually need to be the leaders in the fight. They need to be doing everything possible in this moment to stand up to the anti-environmentalists in Congress and the industries that are funding them.
Thanks, Liz. So now we're going to, we're nearing the end, and we really want to put up the poll one more time because we know some folks didn't get a chance to do that. So the poll should be up on your screen. If you're not seeing it, if you're on your computer, try to minimize other windows because it comes up as a separate pop-up. And if you're on the phone, for some reason, polls in Zoom aren't populating for the call-in, for call-in listeners. So you can send us an email at organize@foe.org, and we can get your response of what you want to do and keep you updated. So for folks on the phone, you know, how would you like to get involved in the FireZinke campaign and work? So I want to, number one, I want to help pass out flyers around congressional offices. Number two, I want to collect petition signatures for our FireZinke petition. 3, I want to organize a house party or meetup in my home or local community. 4, I want to bird dog a member of Congress in my community this October. And 5, I'm interested in all the above. Thanks. And their options are in the chat. And just appreciate, there's some great comments earlier from folks. So as I said, we'll send the toolkit, we'll send the Zinke flyer, the house party checklist, a planning sheet, petition, all those materials after this call. And, you know, as a next step, phase 1, we're really focusing on filing and petitioning, and we'll have another call scheduled in the future to talk more about the next phases and steps of the campaign. And I just want to thank everybody for joining the webinar tonight. Hopefully you can see all of our videos now. If you have any questions, please reach out to us, and have a good night, everybody.
Thanks. Have a great night.
Bye. Have a good night.
Everybody.
Bye.